Hello everyone and welcome to The Nutshell. This week we are excited to speak with our guest as he's both an ambassador for Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, as well as an award-winning lifestyle medicine doctor with a passion to reverse, improve and prevent many chronic conditions including heart disease, cancer, arthritis, diabetes and more with his unique programme Life Colours. He's a founding board member of the European Society of Lifestyle Medicine and has over 20 years of experience as a health and motivational speaker. In 2016, he received a national award in leadership for his work in reversing disease. He currently advises the federal government of Nigeria on health, his mission to bring health, healing and hope to the UK and beyond. So we are delighted to welcome to the podcast Dr. Chidi.
Hello.
Welcome, Dr. Chidi. It's great to have you on. So we've heard a bit about your career achievements in the introduction, but we'd love to go back to the beginning. I've read somewhere that you were training to be a surgeon or you were a surgeon. So can we ask you what inspired you to change direction and pursue a career in lifestyle medicine with a focus on disease prevention?
Well, it's an interesting question because actually I started from wanting to do this sort of medicine before we even knew what it was. When I was about 10, 11 years old, I was raised in a Christian home. It was a Seventh-day Adventist home. Their emphasis has always been on health and also a plant-based diet. That's part of in our faith. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do something to do with health in the future. In fact, Dr. Kellogg of Kellogg's Cornflakes fame was one of the founders of the church. And I thought, well, that guy was amazing. He's curing people from all over the world. That would be interesting to do. So that was my spur to get into medicine, actually. When I got into medical school, many of us, your head starts to get turned, I'm a macho man. I want to do surgery. I want to cut people up and all that stuff. So I got into surgery. And then I found myself, I was up at Cambridge Papworth Hospital. We had part of cardiothoracics as our rotation. And I was with some brilliant surgeons. And I remember there was one man who came in who had had a bypass several months earlier. He needed a redo of his bypass. And I was sitting next to the professor of cardiothoracic surgery. And that professor said to him, well, look, you're too sick to have a bypass. And the man said, well, what can I do? And this professor said, well, there's nothing we can do. And we let him go. And we know that within 3 months, that man died. And I started scratching my head thinking, well, is that it? All this wonderful skill and brain power, and we're just letting this man go off and die. At the same time, I was already running 2 restaurants in Soho called Plant, because I generated these plant-based restaurants. And at the same time, I was getting messages from the restaurant telling me that certain people have just been going 2 or 3 times a week. They're lowering their medication. This was just off the cuff. I wasn't soliciting any information. And it was at that point, and then my father died. He died of complications of diabetes. All this was happening at the same time. And I said, yeah, I want to do a bit more than what I'm doing. I want to see if it's possible to start reversing disease. This was quite a long time ago. This was back in the early 2000s. And then I said, all right, I'm going to take the plunge. I'm going to leave surgery and do something else. We didn't know what it was. There was no lifestyle medicine at the time. But I did hear about a gentleman, Dean Ornish, who was reversing heart disease in America. So I went to have a look at what he was doing, took all the notes I could, came back, and then I started to think, well, I wonder if we could do it for diabetes and other disease. And then I just expanded that way. So I kind of took myself out and started on my own. I retrained as a GP. And then I just started doing my own thing. That's kind of, in a nutshell, the answer.
That's brilliant. So were you already plant-based at the time then when you were practicing conventional medicine?
Absolutely. I was raised as a plant-based. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned looking at reversing diabetes, and that's exactly the topic that we wanted to speak with you today. Well, certainly the prevention of diabetes and putting type 2 diabetes in remission. And we hear quite often people who either have type 2 diabetes or a family history say that, well, diabetes runs in my family. But the question we had for you really is how much of a person's risk is related to their genetics and how much control can a person have on their own risk when it comes to developing type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental question. And I'll try and be gentle with my answer because I've heard this for decades now. Oh, diabetes is genetic, and certain doctors try and say that. My first question is, well, where is the gene for diabetes? We still haven't found that yet. And my next answer is, of all the people that I've reversed, and I've reversed hundreds and hundreds of people with type 2 diabetes, it doesn't matter about their genetic background, doesn't matter about how long they've had it. They've all been able to reverse it. So even if there is a genetic weakness somewhere, obviously lifestyle plays the bigger part. Often people say genetics loads the gun and lifestyle pulls the trigger. Well, I can say in 100% of the cases that I've come across, it doesn't matter about your genetic background, it can be reversed. So lifestyle is the biggest key.
And I think that's really empowering to hear, isn't it? Because then people can look at what choices can make a difference, and we'll certainly go into those in a bit more detail. But before we do, can we just explain what actually type 2 diabetes is? A lot of people think it's a sugar problem, and they hear things like insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. Can you give us a brief overview of physiologically what's happening?
Yeah, and that's the key point for me. Because in fact, when I was looking into how can you reverse diabetes, I did a physiology degree before I did medicine. So I wanted to look at what is the physiology behind it? How is it caused? And if I want to break it down, it would be obviously cells need glucose. All of our cells need glucose energy. In order to get that energy into the cell, glucose doesn't just pass into the cell. We need insulin to be released from the pancreas to bind to the cell, which then opens up the gate for glucose to come in. So that's just how we get glucose. That's in a normal cell. Now, what we have found is that over years, decades of Coca-Cola, Mars bars, whatever, other confectionaries can be used, the cells get stimulated and stimulated by insulin because every time you have a sugar high, you need insulin to deal with it. So if the cells are constantly being surrounded by insulin, I think of it. Did you ever play that game, Knock Down Ginger, when you were children? No, you're too good for that. No, Knock Down Ginger
I don't know
was,
that one.
yeah, Knock Down Ginger is when you knock on somebody's door and run away. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you know that. Different name, but you know it. So when I was a kid, we used to play that all the time. Knock on somebody's door, run away. Somebody would come to the door first time. After the third, fourth, fifth time, they don't come to the door. They don't open the door. And it's a bit like how insulin resistance starts. You have lots of insulin knocking on the door when you're eating all the junk that we eat. After several years, your cells become resistant to that knocking on the door of insulin. So insulin binds, but it just doesn't open up. It's fed up. Also, and probably we'll get onto it, if fat does not need insulin to pass into the cell, it goes straight into the cell, but it obviously raises the amount of calories within the cell. Therefore, it doesn't need as much energy. So it becomes even more insulin resistant. That is how we actually become insulin resistant and become type 2 diabetic. Your cells no longer respond to insulin. Sugar then builds up outside of the cell in the bloodstream, and then it causes all the toxicity that sugar causes, leading to vessel damage, blindness, limb numbness, and all that sort of thing.
Just to sort of really clarify the point, you mentioned sort of excess sugar and insulin resistance. I try to explain to my colleagues how fat can also contribute, so excess saturated fat. Some people haven't quite connected that to insulin resistance because we just see it as a sugar problem. How would
That's
you
right.
explain that to someone?
Well, there are four main mechanisms for insulin resistance. Yes, there's sugar and insulin. There's certainly fat. As I said, fat just passes into the cell, raises the calorific value of the cell. Therefore, the cell does not need as much sugar, so it becomes insulin resistant. That's another way. But remember, you will know many people who have been on steroid therapy and have become diabetic after that. They're not overweight, but they've just been on steroids. Steroids raises our insulin resistance as well. Now, the natural steroids that come from stress will cause that too. So if you go through an awful lot of prolonged stress, your insulin resistance raises as well. And then finally, something very interesting that not a lot of people know about is that meat consumption, some of the amino acids present in meat, like leucine, stimulates, goes into the cell and causes the cell to, in fact, programs it to become more insulin resistant. So you've got the sugar, the fat, the stress, and the meat. Those are the four ways that you raise your insulin resistance.
Okay, that's really useful to know. And many people listening to this podcast would have heard that plant-based diets can reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes and in fact can even treat or induce remission. And can you explain where that evidence comes from? How strong is that evidence?
Okay, well, I'll go back before the evidence, if I may. Because as I said, for me to understand how insulin resistance took place and how you can reverse it, this was before most of the studies that have come out. So all I did was go back to first principles of physiology. Now, later in life, I think 2014, something like that, we had a direct study done up in Newcastle, and they showed one of the elements of insulin resistance, which is fat. Fat, because if there's lots of fat in the liver, there's lots of fat in the pancreas, then you get insulin resistance. But before that, we were seeing that people on bariatric surgery were reversing their type 2 diabetes. Now, I'll go back and say to you, when I was saying that you can reverse type 2 diabetes back in the early 2000s, I was actually called a quack. It's not possible. It's not possible. You can't do it. But then we saw the evidence of people who went on bariatric surgery. They were diabetic. After a few months or weeks, they reversed their diabetes. So then they started to say, okay, well, maybe those people can. And then they went down this road of purely about fat and fat consumption. So it certainly has its root and certainly has its place. Direct study, I think the Retune study as well, I think it was up in Glasgow. They pretty much focus on the fat element. But even before that, there were people reversing diabetes.
And is that purely because of weight loss or are there other mechanisms?
It certainly can be because of weight loss, because as you lower the amount of fat in the system, your cells become less insulin resistant. But I mean, I've treated people who are quite slim. Okay. That doesn't mean, so it's not necessarily a weight issue, but it can be a fat issue. So people can be slim and have a lot of visceral fat. And the visceral fat around the organs is the thing that really triggers a lot of the problems, even more than the subcutaneous fat. But then outside of that, the other things that we've talked about, the stress element and the meat consumption, those things impact also.
Okay, so we're looking at reducing visceral fat, and that will then obviously help insulin resistance. But is there anything specific to plant-based diets that's also protective?
We know that a lot of the phytonutrients that we take in from a healthy plant-based diet, a lovely, colorful diet, protects the cells from oxidation, protects the cells from inflammation. All of those things reduce our risk, even in terms of our stress response. We've talked about how stress can increase your risk. By having a certain type of high antioxidant, high phytonutrient diet, it reduces the stress response. And if you reduce the stress response, you reduce the amount of insulin resistance.
Is it a good time to come in and talk about something we've all heard of, which is keto diets? Because some people will be surprised to hear that even the Royal College of GPs has been promoting a low carb diet for several years through an online module. And so we find that even some of our fellow GPs are quite keen on this. So to me, keto diet, low carb diet, which is then high in things like fat and protein. We've talked about the need to reduce fat on organs and to watch your fat intake. So what would you actually say to those that are advocating for a low carb or a keto diet to prevent diabetes?
I think we have to be honest. We have to be honest and say, when people change to some of these low carbohydrate diets, they can get results. They can get results. That's a fact. But then you look at why they get these results. The results come because, first of all, they're eliminating a lot of the processed food. So as long as you're eliminating processed food, there's going to be a benefit. And you can see some people, they've had a reasonable benefit in that health issue. But here's the caution. When I'm trying to promote healthy living, I say, if I'm helping you reverse diabetes, then it should help every other area of your body too. It's a holistic approach. There is no other no diet outside of a healthy plant-based diet that helps you with every other area. So, for example, when you reverse somebody's high blood pressure or diabetes, they'll say, "Oh, the acid in my stomach has gone as well." Or this pain has gone, and my eyesight seems a bit clearer. It doesn't just help one thing, it helps everything else. These targeted low carb diets that may or may not work, they don't always work with diabetes, will always have an impact, a negative impact on other areas of your life. So if you really want a holistic way of healing, honestly, the only way I've seen is being on a healthy plant-based diet.
So there we're getting into the fact that, yes, you can do a study and it might be run over just, 1 month doing one thing and a month doing something else. And then you can measure what actually happens, say, to somebody's diabetes or their cholesterol levels in that period of time.
Yeah.
But there's a problem, is there, when we're looking at the long-term effects? Are there any studies that are running to look at the long-term effects of this diet, or are they just anecdotal at the moment?
Well, I mean, we don't know about the long-term effects, and that's the key. I mean, we want to live healthy lives long term. We want a nice, healthy, long health span, not a disease span. So, unless they are following up years and even decades down the line, what happens to the elderly? What happens to children born from mothers who've been on a keto? Unless they've done that, I mean, I would say, in my own experience, it is better to be on a healthy plant-based diet because that's just been proven.
I think the thing we always observe on these, particularly if it's a meat-based keto diet, is that people are really lacking in fibre, aren't they, in the long term? So this target of try and eat 30 grams of fibre a day, it's pretty difficult to meet on those diets.
Well, that's right. I mean, fiber, and also we talk about antioxidants, phytonutrients. Where are they in the meat? They just don't exist. And so people try to, I mean, I've been on some debates with some of these well-respected doctors who believe in this low-carb diet. When you ask them, well, where does the phytonutrients come? Are our bodies not designed to absorb these phytonutrients? There's no real answer there.
What actually happens if you are not lucky enough to see Dr. Chidi and you're within the NHS and you are diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes on an NHS health check, for example? So usually over the age of 40 years old, you didn't know you had it, and then you get a text from your GP and it says, your pre-diabetes, on your blood test, make a routine appointment to follow this up with our GP or nurse. And you're probably going to be offered something like the diabetes prevention program, or if you're already diagnosed with diabetes, Desmond. Does that sort people out, do you think?
Well, I think it works I think they got a 25% success rate, right? And that's after 6 months. I guess anything is better than people still being diabetic. I understand that. But I think that's a pretty poor show. First of all, they have these, if I may say, disgusting diets to be on, heavy in these milk proteins and all that sort of stuff. Some people might say, I prefer to have diabetes than be on that diet. And that's a 6-month program. And after 6 months, I think it's about a 25% success rate. I think that's pretty poor. What we do, if somebody comes to us, we have within 2 months, they're clear. Within 2 months, they're clear. And they're on a healthy plant-based diet, which is not necessarily unattractive and can be very attractive. I should talk about the diet a bit later. But yeah, I'm not really a great advocate of these reversal programs in the GP surgery because they have these protein shakes and all that. I'm not for it. They're not thinking holistically. It's let's target this one issue. Let's see if it can work. And it may have negative implications down the line, but they'll deal with that then with possibly more medication.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It really is an emergency treatment for something that's very much a long-term problem.
Absolutely.
Chidi, can I go back and ask you then about the program that you mentioned? What sort of foods do you advocate? Do you go sort of a lowish carb plant-based, or would you let people eat as many carbohydrates as they want? What's your advice?
Well, it goes back to Dr. Himsworth. I think it was about 100 years ago. He was one of the first people who's trying to find out what's the cause of type 2 diabetes. And he went around the world and he looked at the different diets, and he saw that places like America and Great Britain had high levels of fat, low levels of carbohydrate. Places like Japan had high carbohydrate, low fat, and Japan had hardly any type 2 diabetes. Britain, America had quite a lot. And so he discovered that, yeah, okay, carbohydrate is protective for diabetes. That doesn't make sense to many people until you think about the type of carbohydrate they're using. It's not sweets and biscuits and ice cream. It's fruits and vegetables and grains. Those things contain everything we need to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So that combination of what we talk about, healthy plant-based diet, that is what is necessary to protect us. From day one, I promote a pretty much pure, I call it the beans, greens, and vegetables for the first couple of weeks, just to bring people down to a normal level. And just in case people think that doesn't sound very interesting, my wife, actually, who is an expert plant-based chef, she has a website, Plant Based This, she puts together these beautiful meals, cheap, effective, beautiful, and they do everything you need to reverse type 2 diabetes. Look, I know when I take people who are not plant-based and I put them on this regime, and in the beginning they think, oh, I can't cope with that. I can't just cope with vegetables. But when you present it in the right way, like my wife does, it's not a hassle at all.
Yeah, no, it's delicious. And do you include fats? Do you include sort of unsaturated fats, or?
I only use plant-based material, but yes, there are unsaturated fats, but I don't go into any animal products at all.
No, of course, all
No,
plant-based. But I
yeah,
guess I meant things like nuts and seeds and avocados. Are they all allowed?
absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. No, they're fine. Absolutely fine. I mean, really, this is the way I do it. You could, in my first few weeks, I said it's beans, greens, and vegetables. I could actually have introduced fruit and berries in the first few weeks as well. But just because I want to bring their sugars down under control very quickly and get them off their medication, that's what I do. But all, pretty much everything we talk about, beans, nuts, seeds, fruits, berries, they're all great for type 2 diabetes. We don't really need to avoid them.
No, that's really useful to know. I was going to ask you that question a bit later, but I might ask you that now then, because you often see it on social media. I had a list of popular social media advice that I wanted to pass by you, and one of them
Okay.
was significantly about fruit, because there are people with very big platforms demonizing fruits and oats and all these wonderful foods, and I think that comes from this whole, I don't know, trend of wearing glucose monitors and
Yeah.
seeing that your sugar as it would rise when you have something like fruit. But is that bad for us? What do you tell people when they worry about fruit?
Well, the worst thing you can do is worry. That's stress. Whatever problem you have, worry is never going to make it any better. Now, I'll say about these glucose monitors that there is good and bad. For me, if somebody's on a glucose monitor and I can track, I like lots of information. I like lots of data. And if they tell me, oh, I've eaten this and it's gone up, okay, that's interesting for me because it helps me use that information for later on the individual. But then there's the other side of constantly monitoring and worrying. Oh, what's my glucose level now? That level of worry is not healthy. It's not healthy. The constant worrying about, oh, what's my next result? It's like waiting for your exam results. Who wants that every single day? That's a significant level of stress that we actually have to wean people off of. It's a bit like when people try to lose weight. Having people focusing every day on their calorie intake consumes people, makes them more stressed, and makes them want to eat more. So you have to get people away from this idea that, oh, every second matters. No, we have to live a life. When we talk about lifestyle medicine, well, what style of life do you want? Do you want a miserable life where you're always worrying about this and worrying about that, or do you want to be free? And what we want to do is liberate people to have a proper life.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I suppose it's also educating people that it is normal to have rises in blood sugar, isn't
Of
it? If you
course.
eat something, that is a normal
Yes,
physiological response. And I do get worried when I see that as being demonized online.
absolutely right. And I remember at the beginning when I first was doing this, people say, "Oh, my blood sugar's got up to 8." Well, so was mine. So what? That's good. That's healthy. That's not a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And what about, I'll keep going with this list because I have got it here. What about things like eating foods in a certain order then to reduce the glycemic load? Any merit in that?
It seems that they have to come up with something new to get the clicks, to get the eyeballs. I mean, what on earth has that got to do with anything? I mean, there are some people who say, "Oh, you should eat your fruits at a different time to your vegetables." No, for millennia we've been managing okay. It doesn't cause any problems. So no, I don't believe in that at all.
Mm-hmm. And apple cider vinegar? Would Dr. Chidi prescribe that?
Look, I think apple cider vinegar is quite good. I don't see it as a panacea as people are selling it like it's snake oil. It can do everything. I use apple cider vinegar in my food and in my diet. It is useful. It can help with cholesterol and many other things, but it's not the panacea that everybody thinks it is.
Okay, so use it if you enjoy it, but it's not.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Use
perfect.
it on your fish and chips. I'm joking. It's a joke.
Toe fish and chips.
Absolutely.
maybe
Absolutely.
maybe toe fish, no chips.
Absolutely.
Do you notice that having a predominantly plant-based diet or the benefits that you're getting from this sort of diet is related to the gut microbiome? Because I know we're learning more and more about the microbiome and feeding the gut bacteria there.
Well, I think it makes sense. I mean, when I think about the gut microbiome, I just think about the community of bugs in our gut. Okay. And that community will be, if you feed it in a certain way, you will generate a certain community. Now, if you have a healthy plant-based diet and you're dealing with your issues of stress and everything, you have a certain type of bacteria that will predominate. And they seem to be the good bacteria, the sort of bacteria that keep your immune system tip top, the sort of bacteria that even help to produce vitamin B12 for us, those of us who are plant-based. Now, if you change the diet to a heavy meat, dairy, refined sugar, that generates different gut bacteria, and that gut bacteria is not so great for us. So the closer you stick to the plant-based living that we promote, the healthier your gut microbiome has been shown to be.
What are your thoughts on not just what we eat, but the timing of when we eat? Because there's a lot at the moment in terms of time restricted eating or what's
Yes.
commonly referred to as intermittent fasting. Any benefits for reversal of diabetes or prevention of diabetes, type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, I would say when you get any health professionals or wellness professionals together, they can never agree on everything. They can never, you know that. But I think there's one thing that's quite universal amongst all of us is that we know there is a place for fasting. There is a place for fasting. Much of the studies that have been done are unequivocal that if you introduce some type of fasting into your lifestyle, you live longer, you live healthier. Okay, we kind of all know that. Now, obviously, I started this by telling you I'm a Christian. I mean, fasting is a big part of Christianity, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it was introduced all those years ago, not just for spiritual enlightenment, but also for our bodies. Now, how you fast, I often say is up to you. For example, most days I would eat one meal a day, most days. So that's kind of like a fast, right? Some people like to cut off eating by 4 p.m. Whatever the case, anytime you have that break, there's something that it does to the cells. They call it hormesis. Hormesis, I don't know if you've heard of that, whereby you put your cells under some kind of pressure. It could be lack of food. It could be cold. It could be extreme heat. When you do that, your cells then invent ways to survive better, which means that the cells become healthier. So fasting is one of the best and easiest ways to do it. And certainly with reversing type 2 diabetes. So I only recommend 2 meals a day, which means that you have the fast overnight and then you have a fast during the day. And that brings you to the place of normality for your blood sugar a lot quicker. So I'm a great advocate of some type of fasting, but it must suit your own lifestyle.
Hmm. I've always wondered though, is that like a calorie restriction in a way that you've actually eliminated a meal, or do you see benefits from fasting even if you maintain the same calories but eating it within a shorter time frame?
That's right. So people say to me, "Oh, well, I can't survive on that." I said, "No, you can eat the same amount of food. I don't mind, but have that break in between." Because what it's doing is telling those cells, "Hey, look, for a period of time, we have no food. That will program the cells to become more insulin sensitive again because we don't have any calories around. They then wake up and become more insulin sensitive. So it's not just about the amount of calories you're taking in, it's that break and that fasting, starving the cells for a little bit, even though you're eating more food at either end of the fast.
That's really interesting. And you'd recommend people do it, as what works for them in their lifestyle. So maybe an
Absolutely.
early dinner or something like that, or
Yes.
later
Yeah.
breakfast, or
Yeah. And I know people who will fast for 24 hours once a week or twice a month.
right.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that works for them too. But as I say, anything that can work for you. I don't
Okay.
recommend everybody do the one meal a day.
No. And obviously be cautious if you're listening to this and you're already on medication that might lower your blood sugars, particularly if you're injecting insulin or taking some oral medication that lowers blood sugars. Always speak to your healthcare professional if you're thinking about fasting and you're already taking that sort of medication, I would suspect. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that if you're on medication, first of all, never do this on your own.
Yeah.
Never do it on your own. People often go off, and in fact, people have told me, "Yes, I listened to some of your talks and I did it, and I'm cured." But I just don't recommend anybody does it without being monitored. And what I would do is put you onto a certain regime that within a few weeks you'd have to come off the medication anyway, and then all of these things become a lot more easier.
Yeah, yeah. But if you're not on medication and you're just interested in, preventing this condition, I suppose it's
Yes,
just a case of stop snacking, isn't it? The sort of the advice that
absolutely,
your mum would have given you for where you
absolutely.
to stop snacking, don't eat after dinner. I
Yes,
remember my mum saying that.
I'm just remembering some advice, when you'd say, "What's for pudding?" and they would say, "There's fruit for pudding." And you'd think,
the good old days, the good old days.
Absolutely. There's something to be said, isn't there, for that?
Yeah, but
um,
there was less diabetes in those days, less heart disease in those days.
well,
You
exactly.
know, our elderly relatives who are living into their 90s and 100s who didn't know all the stuff that we know
Mm,
were healthy. You look back in the days of World War II, hardly any diabetes, hardly any heart disease. Yes, we were on rations, but I'm not saying we should introduce rations, but those rations seem to work for us. Living a slightly poorer lifestyle helped us out. You know,
And moving on from nutrition alone and looking at the other pillars of lifestyle medicine, I know you talked a little bit about stress, but I wanted to ask you about the evidence for exercise. Is there evidence of exercise on its own, irrespective of diet, when it comes to metabolic syndrome and diabetes?
yeah, I was doing some work many years ago with an organization called Exercise is Medicine. I don't know if you've come across them. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And when you look at the the benefits that come from just exercise alone, I mean, the list is longer than your arm of the good it will do for you mentally. Obviously, your weight, the way you look, getting outside and getting the fresh air inside whilst you're exercising. No, on its own. I mean, for me, I would say if you want to reverse type 2 diabetes, okay, 80% of it is diet, but there's a big 20% that is exercise as well. And overreach in all of that is stress, helped by exercise, helped by diet.
yeah, because and I always emphasize how much diet is involved because working in general practice, it's so common for people to come in, you give them some news about pre-diabetes or diabetes, and their first question is, do you have, anything on the health service so that I can join a gym, any
Yeah.
free membership or something? And often we don't, because
Hmm.
there's not good evidence for it actually helping people to move. But I always say to them, look, even if that is part of the problem, it's mostly diet. Coming back to what we've already been talking about, the change in environment we've got, and this idea that we're in a really obesogenic environment now. I was listening to the radio yesterday, and it was a national radio station, and the presenter, it was perhaps one of the most depressing things I've ever heard, but he presented it as something quite funny, and he was talking about his grandchild and said that, his daughter updated him on all her firsts, and it was sort of like first walking, first words, and he said, and today I got a picture of her with her first Happy Meal, so a McDonald's Happy Meal. And I thought, oh my gosh, this then we're talking about helping people to make better choices when the environment they're in is so difficult. So
Yes.
tell us about how you do this. How do you motivate people to make and stick to these lifestyle measures?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Good question. The Happy Meal. I mean, look, whatever you want to say about McDonald's, they are brilliant at marketing. Brilliant. I mean, they're absolutely amazing. Happy Meal. Imagine that. Um, happy on the outside, sad on the inside, we would say. I think we have a lot of work to do to make the healthy lifestyle attractive. Attractive. It should be. When I opened my first restaurant, that was my whole aim. Not to be like, there were a few vegetarian, vegan restaurants out at the time, but I wanted it to look appealing, smell appealing, all the food, it was fast food, needed to look nice and needed to taste nice and everything. We have to do more than just say it's healthy. That's not enough. The marketing must be, it's fantastic, it's cheap, it's easy. We have to promote that. I'll go back to my wife. That was her whole thrust. So she started off, originates from Jamaica. And if you're trying to convert people from the Caribbean and Africa into a healthy plant-based meal, I said, oh, boring vegetables, no seasoning, whatever. So she started doing the spices and the seasoning that would appeal to them. And then eventually she found, well, it's not just the Africans and Caribbeans that like it, it's everybody likes it. Everybody likes more flavor, spice, and beauty. When you put that into a nutshell, whereby you say, okay, not only does it taste nice, not only does it look nice, but it's doing your body good at the same time. And then in that order, if you say, this is a healthy restaurant, this is a healthy meal, people's mindset thinks, well, that must be horrible, like medicine. Medicine must taste horrible. No, we promote it as beautiful, fantastic tasting flavors, all of that. And by the way, it leads to a healthy lifestyle. We have to just get a bit more clever at presenting what we do. Look, many of us, I mean, we're doctors, health professionals. We tend to talk in a very academic way. And even when we're talking about wealth, we talk in a very academic way, but that cuts off most of the population. For example, the book that I've got coming out in Reversing Diabetes is just a down to earth book that anybody can read. I'm not giving you lots of, well, there's research if you want it, but it's just got to be appealing and down to earth to people. So we've got a bit of a way to go to make this lifestyle more accessible to people and more attractive to people. I mean, for example, I just say this. Often people say, well, what about my children? You say the Happy Meal. How am I going to get them even to eat greens? I mean, it seems like most of these kids, as soon as they come to a certain age, they can't stand greens. Well, then we just have to be a bit clever and just say, okay, well, you don't have to eat the leaves of greens, but I can put them in a beautiful berry smoothie. Most kids like berry smoothies. You could hide all the goodness in one of those things. And just we need to be a bit more just tactical in our approach.
And can we find all these kind of tips and how you do it? Is this what's in your book?
Yes, yes. The ways to make it simple, if you like, the shortcuts to a healthy lifestyle. Because yeah, nobody really wants to. I mean, there are some great books out there about how to live a healthy lifestyle, but they're that thick, and they just need simple ways, simple shortcuts to life. Nobody's got the time anymore. I understand that. So let's just give them what they need in a package that they can palate, literally.
So how thick is this book then, Dr. Chidi? And how can we get hold of it?
Great, thank you for the question. Yeah, so it's only about 150 pages, but a lot of that is pictures. Like a lot of it is pictures, and it looks quite beautiful as well. It's being printed as we speak, so it will soon be right. Restoring Health, Reversing Diabetes, and it's the start of a series. We've got 9 of these books about to come out: cancer, heart disease, blood pressure, and all of that. So it's on its way out. We also have an app that will be coming out associated with the books that should be able to guide you into a healthier lifestyle. Okay, but that's something exciting. It's taking a bit of technical details to get it down pat, but we're on our way.
Wow, that's really exciting, because I think, yeah, a book that's 150 pages and mostly pictures, that's within everyone's grasp, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I did it for my mindset.
right. So if people, they want to go beyond the book and they want to actually have, a piece of time with you yourself, how can
Yes.
they actually consult with you?
Well, the easiest way to do it is just to drop me an email. I think you guys got my email. It's Dr. Chid at mac.com. But also there's the website, drchidi.com, you can look at. There's ways to follow me on X or the YouTube channel, all those different ways to get in touch with me. And also for the food, because I must not forget about the food, my wife's site, plant-based cis, and then sister, SIS, plant-based cis. Beautiful recipes that she demonstrates how to put them together.
Right. Yeah. Actually, when you were talking about her earlier on, I thought we must get the details, because I think, yeah, she's the star of the show, really, isn't she?
Absolutely.
And so can we ask then, as we love asking our guests what they're having for dinner tonight, will it be one of your wife's recipes?
Well, I'm in South Carolina in a hotel, so
Oh.
sadly, I won't get. But actually, I'm at a conference of doctors who, in fact, it's a conference called Amen, Adventist. Here we go again, Adventist Medical Evangelism Network. All the food is plant based. All the food is plant based. I'll let you know what it's like.
Fantastic. Oh, that's good to hear. We need more medical conferences with plant-based foods, don't we? But what
Absolutely.
would be your sort of favourite go-to dinner, I guess, if you're home?
Yeah. Well, there's a wonderful dish that my wife does. It's tofu, but very seasoned tofu and tomato and spinach and onion. And I love whole grain rice, but she does the whole grain rice with peas. It's like a Caribbean dish, rice and peas. And then also she does a beautiful spinach dish with lots of garlic and onions in it. I mean, that for me is heaven. And a lovely fruit salad after.
Oh, so it is fruit for dessert.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Once you're used to it, you love it. I think it was just,
Yeah.
it's so confusing as a child when you're still eating a lot of really sweet stuff, and then coming back to the fruit
Yes.
after a meal is quite tricky.
Oh no, that's true.
But now I don't laugh at having fruit salad for dessert. It's one of my favorite things.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
love it.
same. I'd like a square of dark chocolate alongside it.
Oh, you're a dark chocolate fan. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I
I've
love to
never
end the
gotten into
evening.
it, but lots of healthy people love it. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a square because it's quite strong, so it's really nice to have end the meal with.
I mean, that's what I noticed. People who take dark chocolate don't take much of it.
Yeah,
People like milk chocolate can eat bar after bar, you know.
it's very true.
You can't take much of it, because now Daisy is on to the 90% or something, which she bought me a box for Christmas. No, for my birthday, wasn't it? It
Right.
takes all the saliva from your mouth, so you can only have a small amount.
That's right. So hardcore, right? I
Get your
see.
cocoa hit. What about you, Claire? What are you having for your dinner tonight?
Oh, I've got my work cut out. I think I need your wife here, Chidi, because I've actually invited some friends over for dinner, and there's quite a few of them. And I've said that tonight I'm actually going to. I've talked about tacos a lot, but it's because I had this really good book which was about plant-based tacos, and so I'm having people over for three different, tacos 3 ways, which means that I've got to go and find all the tricky ingredients as well. All the things that you in the co-op, like plantain and ripe mangoes, things like that.
Okay.
So you're doing the
Excellent.
plantain one again. That sounds good, Claire.
That's my old friend black bean and plantain.
Plantain, oh, such a good combo.
Well, that sounds good.
Buffalo cauliflower, which is in a sort of less healthy, unless you've made it yourself, barbecue sauce.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be around yours one of these days, that's for sure.
One day. And,
we want those tacos.
Not forgetting Friday nights in Daisy's household are usually something special. So
All fun.
what's tonight?
What's tonight? Well, I tell you, I'm doing this new thing, which I'm excited about, is once a week I'm cooking with a vegetable, a vegetable I don't normally cook with. So, because we've got in a bit of a rut, it's always broccoli, green beans, it's the same things over and over again, peppers. So I am doing a fennel and Swiss chard gratin.
Wow.
Yeah, because I just never cook with fennel, and I love fennel. I think it's lovely.
Fantastic.
So
Well, and
yeah,
that's a good idea. That's a very good idea. Rotating, trying new things. That's wonderful.
Just once a week or once every 10 days or so, because I won't have the mental bandwidth to do a new recipe every night. So it's just a sort of a new thing to motivate myself to eat different veg. I thought a gratin would be easy because I don't know what else to do with fennel.
Right.
It's wonderfully seasonal though, because we've had fennel and Swiss chard in our veg box this week. So
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going for seasonal as well. I forgot to mention that. So I'll do that, and I'll do some tofu steaks beside it. So I quite like just slicing the tofu in like a block and then seasoning it and then putting it in panko breadcrumbs actually, and either shallow frying or popping it in my air fryer if people are no oil. And yeah, that goes quite well with that sort of like creamy gratin. I'll use some cashew cheese sauce for my gratin that I'll make with nutritional yeast and cashews. So yeah, it's going to be, fingers crossed, a nice warming autumnal dinner.
Oh, very good, by the way. I mean, you're all pretty good chefs yourself.
Well, we love food, so
good at talking about food. You never see these photos on Instagram though.
No, we're too busy eating them, not taking photos of them.
Absolutely.
But I'm very much looking forward to checking out your wife's website and getting some more inspiration. So thank you for that. We'll pop those links in the show notes.
Sure,
and
thank you.
And thank you for your time and for coming on the podcast. And we look forward to seeing your books. When do we know a release date?
It should be before Christmas. Yeah,
nice.
Before Christmas. Yeah, but no, it's been a pleasure being here, and keep up the wonderful work. It's very important, and it's nice to have this sort of connection and sort of promotion of this sort of lifestyle. I do appreciate it.
Well, it's so important. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.